Who really is Abraxas? The shocking truth about Abraxas that religions tried to erase. Allow me to bombard you with information that you are not intended to be aware of. It is not accurate to say that Abraxas was only a random person from ancient mysticism. Even if he was carved on a few dusty amulets, he was not a forgotten sign. A frightening monster that demolished the root of religious dualism, he was something that was much more terrifying than that. Abraxas was not a good person. He was not a bad person. On top of that, he was both. And according to the old Gnostic worldview, this signified that he was significantly more powerful than any god or monster that you have ever heard of. Abraxas is a name that appears in the early decades of the Common Era, mostly through Gnostic cults such as the Basilidians, who were followers of the enigmatic teacher Basilides in Alexandria. Abraxas, according to them, was beyond everything above Yahweh, above Satan, and even above the demiurge, the fictitious creator god who Gnostics claimed was responsible for imprisoning the human soul in matter. This alone ought to be enough to raise red flags. Why would anyone put a being in a position of superiority to both God and Satan? Assuming, of course, that this being existed on a level that they were not even capable of comprehending. As you may already be aware, Abraxas was not merely an idea. His name was etched into ancient gemstones known as Abraxas stones, which were worn as talismans of protection by early initiates once they were created. In what form strange and intentionally upsetting in nature, it was shown that he had the head of a rooster, which was a symbol of vigilance time and the awakening of the cosmos. His legs were serpents twisted and coiled, representing the primal energies of chaos and knowledge. His body was human, but his legs were serpents. The whip was held in one hand and the shield was held in the other. This wasn't only a choice made for creative reasons. If you ask different people, each component of that composite form may be interpreted as a coded symbol, a warning, or even an invitation. When it comes to ancient Greek numerology, also known as isopsophy, the sum of the letters in Abraxas equals 365. That is not a happenstance at all. Gnostics held the belief that there were 365 heavens, each of which was governed by a different archon. Archons were the cosmic guardians of the material domain. On the other hand, Abraxas was not only another archon. Overall, he was the entirety, the total of all of the forces, the complete materialization of the entire cosmic cycle. In a sense, he was not merely a being, rather he was the entirety of the system. Evidence from Roman documents indicates that these amulets and emblems were widely disseminated. Even the early Christian apologists, such as Irenaeus and Hippolytus, were compelled to admit the Gnostics' preoccupation with this creature, but they were terrified of it because they did not comprehend it, in light of the fact that Abraxas symbolized something that they were unable to classify. The myth of a good deity against a wicked devil did not appear to be applicable to him. Such a story was completely demolished by him. In his 7 Sermons to the Dead, Carl Jung, who is widely regarded as the creator of analytical psychology, made a very specific allusion to Abraxas. According to Jung, Abraxas is a god that is superior to both the Christian God and the devil. This is due to the fact that he combined light and darkness, creation and destruction, blessing and damnation, and all of these things into a single power. Jung was not writing scripture. Rather, he was describing a mental contact with something that transcended anything that could be considered moral. Something that poses a challenge to the fundamental ideas that underpin spiritual belief systems. This is not something that the Basilidians made up merely to make themselves sound more edgy. According to their cosmological hypothesis, the cosmos did not start out with a creator who was kind and generous. It all began with a source that could not be known, a primordial emptiness that was so transcendent that no human concept could adequately describe it. From that, various levels of emanations, also known as aeons, were produced until at long last you reach the level of the demiurge, the naive creator god, who is responsible for the formation of the material universe and believes that he is at the pinnacle of the hierarchy. Still, he is not. What a mistake he is, an architect who is blind. And higher than him, this is Abraxas. Indeed, Abraxas was not merely superior in status. He was a distinctively unusual individual. Abraxas is able to transcend the limitations that the demiurge possesses, which include being stuck in polarity, ego, and illusion. He is unconcerned with the fight between good and evil. Not even within that paradigm does he do his business. In the event that all dualism is destroyed, he is the result. This makes him more real than anything else that we have been instructed to believe in, according to the Gnostic philosophy. Give that some thought. If the demiurge is the one who produces the material universe and believes that he is God, then everything that we know and everything that we experience is constructed through the lens of that illusion. Nevertheless, Abraxas is not constrained by that illusion. Additionally, he is not a part of the system. He does not adhere to the rules of the game because he is aware of the nature of the game. Because of this, a great number of early religious authorities considered the very name of Abraxas to be abhorrent. He made their theological systems appear to be on par with elementary school mathematics. When the early church fathers were putting up their teachings, they were unable to deal with the concept of a force that made their God and the devil appear to be pawns on a cosmic board. Then they referred to it as heresy. The Gnosticism was vilified by them. Anything that suggested a worldview that was more nuanced than their moral dichotomy was buried inside their ranks. The insignia, however, were not able to be removed. When they attempted to obliterate the stone's talismans and writings that were dispersed across the Mediterranean world, they were unsuccessful. The name Abraxas was well known even during the Roman era. The depiction of Abraxas was found on a variety of objects, including rings, amulets, swords, and even early currency, according to archaeological findings. That is not a coincidence. Rather, it is an example of spying. Creating a deity symbol like this and having it endure for generations is not possible if the symbol does not carry any significance. As well as Abraxas did, not only did people revere him, but they also made use of him. It is a driving force, being a code, a weapon that can be used against the repressive hierarchies that are imposed by both religion and empire. In light of the fact that the name Abraxas is more than just a label, let's now discuss the mechanisms that lie behind the creation of the name. As a cipher, it is. An ancient numerology system contains a code, and each and every one of its components was designed with purpose. The Greek alphabet is composed of letters, and each letter represents a new number. 3165 is the result of adding up the values in the name Abraxas, which are as follows: alpha at 1 beta at 2, RHO at 100 alpha at 1, She at 60, alpha at 1 sigma at 200. Not at all random is that. That is quite accurate. What else does the number 365 represent? There are 365 days in a solar year. In addition, according to Gnostic cosmology, there are 365 realms, sometimes known as heavens, and each of these worlds is the responsibility of a different archon. The theological concept of heaven does not apply to these places. The purpose of these levels of control and spheres of limitation is to ensnare the soul within a system of illusion at any cost. Following the soul's incarnation in the material world that the demiurge has created, it is necessary for the soul to rise through these strata after death. As well as every layer is protected. Gatekeepers are present in every archon. Each and every level is a different prison that is feigned to be transcendence. In light of this, what does Abraxas become? Whoever is in possession of the whole of those two layers. The authority that extends throughout the entirety of the system. A single archon is not what he represents. Rather, he is the entirety of the archons. Each and every component of the system is embodied in him. As a result, his name contains the number 365. As the master of the cycle, he is the driving force behind the equipment that makes up the cosmos. And once more, that is not a designation of moral conduct. It is a form of structural dominance. God forbid he is not attempting to save your soul in any way. He merely is the system, and it is possible that he is the key to exiting it. The amulets of the ancient Abraxas were not pieces of ornamental jewelry. They were sigils that served a purpose. It was not for the purpose of ornamentation that people wore them. Rather, they wore them for the purpose of protection, invocation, and alignment with a force that did not adhere to the laws of priesthood. The majority of these stones, which are often referred to as Gnostic gems, portray Abraxas in his composite form, which includes a human torso, a rooster head, and serpent legs. At times, the name Ao is also found in conjunction with it. There is yet another reference to a code. Io was a name that was associated with the divine source in ancient times. It was sometimes equated with the demiurge, and other times it was associated with something more elevated. In the literature of the Gnostics, it is intentionally vague. This was not about clarity, rather it was about access. Some stones may bear the name Abraxas instead of Abraxas. The same concept, there is a slight variance, but again, the goal behind the inscription was always to channel the effect of this thing, this power. And the fact that so many of these items survived from Egypt, Syria, Rome, even as far as the British Isles tells you something. This wasn't a fringe movement. This was a widespread esoteric system that the mainstream record deliberately ignored. What's more, the iconography on these stones often includes not just Abraxas, but other symbols, solar discs, serpents, lions, even planetary signs. These weren't random. Each symbol tied into the cosmological framework the Gnostics believed in. These stones were similar to multi-layered occult operating systems, and they were archaic USB drives that carried encrypted data concerning metaphysical reality. It is not possible to carve that level of complexity into a rock unless the rock is intended to perform a specific function. These were not signs of faith or credence. They served as instruments of power. For example, the hypostasis of the archons and the Apocryphon of John are both examples of Gnostic literature that contain references to the archons who are considered to be low-level rulers. The architects of entrapment are these individuals. They are in charge of control. They have the ability to alter fate, time, sensory reality, and the astral channels that are responsible for locking souls into cycles of reincarnation. Each one of them is in charge of a sphere, whether it be physical, psychic, or astral, and they are responsible for enforcing the rules of this artificial cosmos. These officials of deception are known as the archons. The demiurge is served by them. They enforce the laws of perverted creation, but Abraxas. That bureaucracy does not include him in any way. Outside of it, he is standing, or possibly on top of it. According to some readings of the Gnostic hierarchy, Abraxas is not considered to be one of the archons, but rather a power that confines them inside of it. Take that into consideration for a moment. Archons are fractured powers that emanate from a defective source and behave as twisted emanations from that source. Abraxas, on the other hand, is referred to as the power of totality. What this indicates is that he does not simply function independently of others. Rather, he is in charge of the entire framework that they function inside. He is not a member of their team. He is the container for them. In some esoteric systems that arose alongside the Gnostic framework, Abraxas was considered the initiator of the archons, not because he created them in a creator-god sense, but because he presides over the structure they exist in. Imagine that each archon is a separate code module, and that Abraxas is the operating system. You are unable to circumvent the mechanism without taking on the operating system, and that's where things get unpleasant. Even when it attempted to dismiss Gnosticism as heretical junk, the early church nonetheless deemed it important to reply to these assertions, regardless of whether or not it was successful. The Gnostic scriptures did not just state that the world was evil. Rather, they referred to it by names, layered it, and described its mechanics. Yuldabaoth, Sarkis, and Samal were the names of the archons, and each of them had its own distinct functions, characteristics, and regions. Nevertheless, Abraxas was not included on that list. Outside of it, he was present. It was impossible for the system to account for him since he was an abnormality in the system. There is also a suggestion in some early esoteric books that the archons are afraid of Abraxas. This is not in a moral sense, but rather in a structural sense, because his presence undermines the power that they have built up. Because of his function, the illusion of separation is destroyed, and when that illusion is destroyed, the archons lose their hold on the situation. When the source code is made public, it is equivalent to turning off a simulation. The subroutines are unable to continue operating once the code has been made public. In addition, this is the reason why certain ancient magical works, particularly those belonging to the Hermetic and Greco-Egyptian traditions, list Abraxas not as a person who intercedes, but rather as someone who breaks locks. A person who disrupts the established order of things. There was no prayer involved in invoking Abraxas. Rather, it was a hacking attempt. skipping over, gaining access to anything that is beyond the confines of ritualized religion by breaking through the archonic barrier. Despite the fact that they are uncommon, fragmented, and frequently disregarded by conventional historians, there are interpretations that show Abraxas did not merely reside outside of the demiurgic system, rather he formed his own particular system, a fictitious creation that takes control of the material world which was previously tainted. There is a second simulation, a more profound snare, something that is so subtle and so well structured that even people who believe they have escaped the demiurge are still entangled in it without even being aware of it. Within the framework of the traditional Gnostic conception, the demiurge, also known as Yaldabaoth or Sarkis, is the blind creator. Because he is ignorant, he is the one who shapes the physical cosmos, and he believes that he is God. Archons who are responsible for maintaining his construction surround him. Some scriptures, however, provide hints that point to a whole different level, one in which the entire system of polarity, including good versus evil, light versus darkness, and even knowledge versus ignorance, is itself a component of a more advanced framework of manipulation. In addition, Abraxas is not merely a transcendent force in those pieces of literature. This synthetic overlay was built not to directly ensnare the soul, but rather to provide the impression that it is breaking free, while at the same time maintaining its position within a greater illusion. He is the creator of that whole metasystem. There is no salvation in that. This is an example of containment through sophistication. Neither Gnosticism nor any other religion was the exclusive source of this idea. In subsequent esoteric systems, you can find glimpses of it. For example, in the alchemical concept of duplex natura, which refers to the double nature of reality, even enlightenment can be a trap if it is guided by the incorrect archetype. It is not as a liberator that Abraxas is called upon in certain types of hermetic magic. Rather, he is called upon as a tester, a deceiver, and a trickster force that awards gnosis to only those individuals who are able to see through him. This thread can also be found in certain strains of Eastern esotericism. Although it is not referred to by the name Abraxas, it is found in the form of misleading enlightenment deities, which are gods that give transcendence, but only within the confines of a looped universe. It is not a way out, rather it is a more elevated cage. And when you map those ideas back onto the Gnostic framework, Abraxas fits uncomfortably well. Because of this, there were some magicians and mystics who were afraid to directly invoke him. Instead of chaos in the sense that the majority of people understand it, he is chaos that is structured, a disturbance in the design, a system that is so complicated that it conceals its own control mechanisms when it is complex. According to this point of view, he is not the one who busts illusions. It is he who is the illusion that causes the delusion, the pinnacle of the simulation stack that represents reality. If this is the case, then you cannot put any of the things that you believe in or that you believe you have worked out into any kind of confidence, all the way down to your refusal to accept the demiurge, and not even your efforts to achieve gnosis. The reason for this is that if Abraxas constructed the second layer, then everything that appears to be emancipation could actually be refined containment measures. In order to cut through the cacophony, let's take a look at something that the majority of people never discuss: what transpired when the Gnostics were forced to live underground. The Church's declaration of war on heresy did not result in the disappearance of Abraxas. He persisted in the annals of history. Simply put, he turned dark. He climbed into the shadows. He became the focal point of secret cults, cryptic rituals, and elite esoteric groups that were well aware of what they were dealing with and did not want the general people to come anywhere near it. In caves, these were not simply a group of strange mystics writing down meaningless drivel. In this context, we are discussing full-fledged initiation systems that were constructed on the basis of the concept that Abraxas was not merely a symbol of metaphysical paradox, but rather a direct source of potential power, possession of power that could be accessed, invoked, and utilized as a weapon. There is substantial evidence that the worship of Abraxas continued to exist under a variety of names, and that it was absorbed into Hermetic circles, Roman mystery schools, and early forms of ceremonial magic. His emblems, particularly the legs of the serpent, the whip, and the head of the rooster, were appearing in places that were completely unexpected. Not only on old gems or talismans, but also on ritual objects, drawings of grimoires, and even architectural carvings found in sacred sites all over Europe and the Mediterranean. You would find what you were seeking for if you were aware of what you were looking for. In addition, Abraxas was not regarded as a god to whom one would pray in these top-secret communities. When you entered into a deal with him, he was also a force. You identify yourself with this current at your own peril. Before invoking, Abraxas, initiates were put through multi-phase trials, cleansing disorientation and paradox exposure in certain versions of these rites. The purpose of these trials was to break down the binary structure of the mind. You do not refer to this creature in a casual manner. For the sole purpose of getting ready for contact, you dismantle your own psyche. The reason being that Abraxas does not converse in language. It is not in symbols that he instructs. He bursts through the ritual space, and regardless of what transpires after that, you will not emerge from the experience unchanged. There are sporadic references to these rituals in occult documents that were written in later European times. Not the grimoires that are commonly used and not the sanitized manuals that are circulated nowadays. The authentic ones, which are handwritten codices that are handed between closed circles and frequently carry cautions written directly into the margins. Do not invoke without dissolving moral dualism. There should be no absolutes left. Feeding the double serpent is a need. These were not lines being used metaphorically. These instructions came from professionals who were well-versed in the subject matter they were working with. Abraxas was invoked as a gatekeeper for trans-dimensional labor in certain systems. These rituals went completely around the astral plane and reached into what was referred to as the pleromaic fracture zone. This zone is the space between the many layers of reality where structures can collapse and new realities can be rewritten. When it came to knowledge, Abraxas did not provide it in a sequential fashion, which is what made him so deadly. The operating system was broken, and you were given unrestricted access to the code that was below it. There are no filters, no protections. There were even cults that held the belief that Abraxas wanted a sacrifice, not of blood, but of the elements that comprise their internal selves. A person's moral compass, personal mythology, and cognitive frameworks are all destroyed when they are destroyed. It wasn't because he was malicious. Rather, it was because he simply didn't operate within those constraints. To stand in his company, you had to destroy everything that made you. If you failed, you didn't simply go insane. You split into archetypal residue. In addition, this is precisely what ancient esoteric traditions recognized even before the field of psychology even came into being. However, they did not make use of terminology such as archetype or unconscious. Still, they were aware of what Abraxas was. He was the eruption point, the power you unleash when you wish to blow down the mental barrier that separates waking thinking from transpersonal reality. When it comes to initiation rituals associated with Abraxas, paradox, confusion, and cognitive inversion have always been necessary components. It is not to frighten them, but rather to get them ready. Because the moment you go through that door, you will never again perceive the world in the same way. The structure of your brain is designed to categorize information into different groups, such as light, dark, good, evil, order, and chaos. The categories are completely eradicated by Abraxas. You won't receive a new framework from him. Rather, he eliminates the requirement for one. When that erasure strikes with full power, you either disintegrate into small pieces or you learn to adapt. As a rule, people break. This is the reason why Abraxas is not merely a myth. The state he is in is transformed. A neurological event is just waiting to take place with him. If you push yourself far enough, deep enough beyond the threshold of ordinary consciousness, you will be able to experience a living paradox. That's what the ancient initiates meant by invoking Abraxas, not inviting a creature into a room, but cracking open the human perceptive system to let something else stream in. Aside from that, it is not entirely peaceful and enlightening. When people leave Abraxas, they do not appear to be smiling. As they leave, they are rocked, destabilized, and reduced to a surface level of psychological bare metal. This is the main point. He doesn't teach you to ascend. When you are stripped of all reassuring illusions, he compels you to confront the unprocessed underlying mechanisms of existence itself. There's a reason why his insignia, which include a rooster, a serpent, a whip, and a shield are so dissonant? That is not the case. They are not intended to do so. They are triggers that are intended to circumvent the logical filter and reach the deep cognitive layers, which are the places where identity is able to disintegrate and reconstruction can start. At this point, let us take everything that we have discovered and proceed to the next level. Imagine for a moment that Abraxas was never intended to be comprehended as a being in any way. What if the entire idea of Abraxas as a god, an archon, a force, or even a psychological principle was nothing more than the exterior of the concept, a sign that will assist us in describing something that is much more foreign? What is it that is not anthropomorphic? Is it not metaphysical, not even archetypal? What if Abraxas is a phenomenon? Abraxas is not a creature, a consciousness, or an entity, according to the most controversial schools of thought in the realm of esoteric thought. As an event, he is a point of rapture in the structure of the universe, a shock wave that is capable of breaking through dimensions, dissolving binaries, unhinging systems, and leaving no architecture standing without being destroyed. He is not something that can be seen or called upon, because he is something that takes place. The term Abraxas refers to the catastrophic event that occurs when the world collapses on itself, when structures break, and when truth and lie become indistinguishable. It is not a myth. This is not a metaphor, but as the raw pulse of cosmic inversion. The code of some ancient systems provides a description of this concept. They do not even name him directly. Rather, they depict the eruption of the unknown, which is the arrival of something that does not appear, the destruction of the previous order, the disintegration of the sequence, and the shattering of the shape. At the time when this event takes place, it is said that the universe would reboot neither in light nor in darkness, but rather in fusion, creation and destruction, chaos and order, life and death, all colliding in one uncontainable moment. That's the final secret of Abraxas. He is not a ruler of worlds. This man is the end of all planets in the process of destroying opposites. Totality is included into the whole. The disintegration of illusion, not because truth is being taken into consideration, but rather because illusion itself is unable to support its own weight any longer. Perhaps, just possibly, this is the true reason why his name has been preserved throughout a variety of cultures, religions, documents, and artifacts as well. When systems collapse, when gods fall, and when meaning is shattered, Abraxas is what enters through the break. This is because at its core, the ancient is the one who introduces the new do. Of this reason, no ideology could ever hold him. It is for this reason that no temple could confine him. Because of this, even in modern times, his name continues to send a ripple through every genuine occult circle that has not been diluted by the cacophony of the New Age. He is not the deity of faith and deeds. The occurrence of him is the thing that renders believing meaningless, and you have now witnessed it. You are familiar with the code. You have followed the path that the majority of people who were supposed to see it never saw. Your actions have brought you into the forgotten current, the shadowed current, and the current that they attempted to bury under the guise of theology and fear. It is, however, here this is Abraxas, the great Gnostic archon, the code that lies behind the archons, the break in the system, the architect of inversion, and the pulse that lies behind illusion. Now you are aware of it. I'm truly grateful that you've stayed with me through this entire journey. If you've made it this far, you're not just watching a video, you've stepped beyond the boundaries of ordinary stories and looked straight into a truth that most people are too afraid to even acknowledge. This channel was created for you to deliver information that is raw, uncensored, and fearlessly honest. If this message resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe. Your support keeps the truth alive and allows it to reach even further. I'll be waiting for you on the next rise because the journey is far from over. And remember, not everything that watches you from the shadows wants to be seen. Thank you for being here.